once so strong and straight and high. This old barn, it makes me cry. I am told that my great-grandfather built this barn from the sweat of his brow, and the people from around the neighborhood came and helped.
The era of barns is nearing an end in America. Barn ruins are a common sight in Iowa's rural landscape today. This program takes a good look at historic barns in Union and Sharon Townships, Johnson County, Iowa, southwest of Iowa City. It is based on Barnstorming, a tour sponsored by Friends of Historic Preservation and the Johnson County Historical Society in 1990. Today's program looks at a few barns on this 10-barn tour. The barns for this tour were chosen because of their location, shape, historic significance, and special decorations. This is an opportunity to look at barns and appreciate them while we still can. The barns of this program are of the Pennsylvania style. The Pennsylvania barn is a multiple-purpose barn. It is a bank barn. That is, the basement is built into the hillside, and it has its own grade entrance. The second floor is entered by a ramp driveway, usually on the opposite side of the basement entrance. The second floor often has a cantilevered overhang over the basement entrance on the opposite side from the driveway. This overhang is usually called a forebay, although locally it is called foreshoot or overshoot. A forebay seems to be the best term. Sometimes this overhang is supported by the foundation at the ends of the barn. A true cantilevered overhang has no visible means of support. The typical so-called Pennsylvania barn housed livestock in the basement, and the second floor had lofts and mows for hay and straw. In early days, it had a threshing floor where small grains were threshed by hand using flails. It had space for bins to hold the small grains. They were often located in the forebay. The style dates back at least to colonial times and was very prevalent in Pennsylvania. There is strong reason to believe it had beginnings in Europe, specifically in Switzerland. There are many examples of this style in Johnson County, and we are privileged to visit 3 that are very typical, as well as some that are modifications. When we first look at this barn from a distance, we notice its gable roof. I think it's a beautiful barn. It's not large, about 28 by 34 feet. It's in the Pennsylvania style. It's owned by Cecil Altmeyer. In 1869, Philip Altmeyer, a grand-uncle of Cecil's, was the owner. In 1884, the place was sold to a Welshman by the name of Richard Hughes. Then 4 generations of Hugheses lived there before Cecil purchased it. The barn was built in 1875, but I think it's better to learn about this barn from Cecil's lips.
My great-uncle bought it and lived here for, I think, around 10 years in the 1860s. And by the end of the 60s, he moved along with 10, 12 kids to Nebraska. One of whom was already married, but the new daughter was already married, but the son-in-law went along too. And at that point, Richard Hughes bought it. And it's my guess that he might have been broke. I'm sure they called land in Nebraska cheap, so.
That was a good incentive to
Yeah.
go west.
He borrowed $800 against a farm. It hadn't been sold when he left yet, at least it wasn't recorded. He borrowed an additional $800. And we noticed the previous loans, one for $6,000, I believe it is, for 4 years, didn't get paid off until the land sold 10 years later.
I see.
So I think he borrowed that $800 to go to Nebraska on. I believe that's what he started out with. But anyway, it's all oak frame with the mortises and pegs, and except for a few long pine 8x8s that are possibly too long for him to find locally, or didn't want to go to the trouble of hewing them out, so they bought a few. And it was an overhang here on the south with a 4 foot, I think it is, overhang, but someone in later years has put this wall in, and fortunately, because I don't think it'd be standing anymore if they wouldn't have supported this end. There ain't all that much holding it. Time they mortise these timbers, they don't look too strong. The overhang was added when this wall was put in, and it was made from those rafters and supports there from an old silo that I remember as a kid, and it was always kind of black, it seemed to me. There was a number of those pieces used around the place. They were 30 foot long, the ones I found nailed on the fences. So I presume the silo was 30 foot high. They're good lumber, you know. They're just last forever, I guess. There was room for, I believe it's 7 horses on each side. The big stalls there was room for 2 horses in each big stall. And then on this end, it's a 1 stall slot. So that makes 7 on this side and 7 on the other side. I remember Irv used to have 3 cultivators setting out, shovels all shiny, and Irv Hughes. So I suppose that they had plenty of use for horses.
What about the foundation?
Well, all rock. I think brought down from Riverside Drive area, Judge. And I guess it was you, Emily, that said maybe they sledded about in the wintertime. If they could haul more than the wagon might. And also it'd be a job they could do when the farming wasn't so active. Well, the roof is troopered in Kadalka.
What's that?
Well, they took a flat roll tin and had a little crimping machine that bound the 2 sheets together, and a little nailing tab went along in the crimp. So they've survived real well. Lots of them around. That's the second roof. There's old shingles under it. So I presume it might have went on, I think if shingles lasted 50 years, it was probably 1930s when it got the tin put on it. I always liked the place as a kid, you know. Irv did things real well. That everything seemed to grow a little better than anywhere else. He had alfalfa before the rest of us, and it always looked so luxurious. Emily, you haven't learned about the wheel yet. You can roll that.
I know, I started rolling it, but it was easier control.
I see. I remember as a youngster just laying around home, and Dad said, I nailed that together from some old boards. I thought I might need it sometime. And that's when I learned that it was for, if you're digging a well, you laid that on the ground and started in digging. And the person up top laid bricks on right off, and so the pile of bricks rode along down as he dug, and of course it made a nice round hole. Easier to keep it straight and round, I'd judge. And they wouldn't have to lower all those bricks. So I presume that's the standard method of doing it. He'd sure need a hard hat down there, wouldn't he, with somebody? And what a tons of bricks before they get to the bottom. Oh, we have the graffiti on the beam up there. Winter, year of 1885. So that survived real well. Little black letters that are, I guessed that they were painting a buggy in there is the only thing I could think of, why they'd have black paint and a little brush. I don't think it's something the average pioneer had laying around. The floor in the barn up there, the supports were breaking through, and so we had to get new ones in. I hay knifed across the width of the barn and got that hay out of there. And we found so many layers of hay and different types. It's just my guess that it date back to the early years, what with just a junk board floor, which you couldn't really walk on unless you left some hay on it. And then, of course, the leftover hay every year would be there to build up, and that's also why the graffiti survived. It kind of overhung that beam and protected it from...
I think that's nice. I haven't heard anyone recently using a hay knife to cut hay. Was it hard going?
Well, it's just like a lot of other jobs. Not, in the overall scheme of things, it ain't no big job, but it doesn't go by itself.
It looks like you have a neat slice up there.
Yeah.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I took a wrecking bar and pried around under the rest of it to see if there's any more writing, but I didn't find any. So it's nice he left his message for us.
Here's another beautiful barn in the Pennsylvania style. It is on a century farm owned by Glenn H. and Marge Miller. It is in beautiful condition. The barn was built in 1889, built to replace a former barn destroyed by fire.
I'm Glenn Miller. This barn was built by my grandfather in 1889. He came to this area after the Civil War. The lumber, except the siding, was all from the farm here, sawed by a sawmill down across the creek. It was powered by a steam engine that burnt the slabs from the logs of wood that were sawed. It's all native lumber except the outside, which is painted. The foreshoot in the front is also unique in it has no supporting posts, but is supported by long beams that go under the barn floor. It is unique in that in the haymow there are no ties across. It's built what they call slum posts, so there is no ties across the haymow. It's been used for cattle and horses in the early days, and after that we used it for feeding cattle and hogs mostly. We use the barn only as storage now. We do not have any livestock here. There are some antiques stored and a few other things like that that we keep in the barn. But really, we hope to clean it out some and restore the bottom part and perhaps use it for other storage. Barn has been kept in fairly good repair, and we're trying to keep it that way for future generations. We recently had it painted and refixed, some new siding put on, and new barn bats, which are made of redwood and are hard to find in this area at this time. The roof was replaced a few years ago by white painted steel, and so it keeps the barn in good repair with keeping everything dry inside. Well, we used to have the date painted on the north side of the barn above the hay doors here, the opening, and the last painter painted them over, and so we decided to make numerals out of wood and restore them on the west side of the barn this time. My mother was born on this farm, and she lived here all her life, never moved. I was born on the farm here and have never moved. Next year I will be 75, so it has been past the century farm by quite a ways. My grandparents originally came from New York on my mother's side in 1854 and settled in this area. And so the farm has been in the family all these years. Hopefully it will stay in the family. We don't know what will happen. We have 4 daughters and none of them live here at this time.
Here is another barn in the Pennsylvania style. It's a bank barn, but it's built on flat land. So it has a large build-up ramp driveway to the entrance of the second level on the opposite side of its large cantilevered overhang. It's a large barn. We're unable to date exactly just when it was built, but probably prior to 1900. The barn was built by Sam Yoder, an Amishman, and it is 99 feet long. Perhaps he was modest and stopped short of a 100-foot barn. The foundation of this barn is cement, and the sand was probably hauled from the Iowa River about 6 miles away. Mr. M.J. Maas, our informant, said it was all mixed by hand. This is the support for the cantilevered overhang. It appears to be native lumber, partly sawn and partly hand-hewn. There is a very interesting retractable stairway under the forebay. The original color was red. This barn has a special decoration, 3 stars in each end of the gables. Stars are perhaps the most common decoration on barns in Iowa. The barn appears immense when you're inside, when it's empty. The barn shows no evidence of ever having battens to cover the cracks between the siding boards. Construction on the interior shows some hand-hewn timbers and some sawn timbers. There is also good evidence of salvage from another building. That was commonly done. When you find rafters close together at the center of the barn, it is a good guess that they once supported a cupola. The upper level has mows for hay and straw and bins for small grain. The lower level is for livestock. We've looked at 3 Pennsylvania-style barns. When you travel about the Iowa countryside, keep your eyes open for this classic-style barn.
This old barn is falling down. It's looking bad all around. Once so strong and straight and high. This old
Barns are important. They are a visual and material remnant of our heritage. Looking at barns is one way to examine the life of a people. What people thought necessary and desirable or important all took shape in the barn. Watch for other programs documenting the Barnstorming tour in this 3-part series. Hopefully, this program and tour will make you aware that we are losing our barns, help you appreciate what we still have, and encourage preservation efforts.
Once so strong and straight and high. This old barn, it makes me cry. I am told of the hard time 30s when you could barely make a living from the land. And my grandfather took a job far away just to keep the farm in hand. I am told that the barn was neglected, for they did not have the money for repairs. Then my uncle went to France to fight in the war, never returned from there. This old barn is falling down, it's looking bad all around. Once so strong and straight and high, this old barn, it makes me cry. The barn is neglected, and it must be destroyed by my hand. For I live on the farm, but I work in the town, do not make my living from the land. I am told that my great-grandfather built this barn from the sweat of his brow. How I wish I could have seen it way back then, and I'm glad he cannot see it now. This old barn is falling down, it's looking bad all around. Once so strong and straight and high, this old barn, it makes me cry. This old barn makes me cry.